You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. Today I am joined by the LuAnn Nigara. LuAnn is a celebrated media personality, keynote speaker, and seasoned entrepreneur who is part of the partnership team behind both WindowWorks, a custom window treatment and awning retailer, and Exciting Windows, a national membership group for high-achieving window treatment professionals. Known for her dynamic and energetic presentations, LuAnn has been recognized as the go-to keynote speaker for leaders and entrepreneurs to launch their life and get out of their own way. Now in her third business launch, LuAnn Nigara Inc., she provides business resources for creative entrepreneurs through live events, LuAnn University, and one-on-one coaching. LuAnn has published 3 books, is a sought-after columnist, and has captured international attention for her weekly podcast called A Well-Designed Business, which has more than 750 episodes and over 5 million downloads. And on top of all that, she's my mom. I'm going to keep my intros and outros hopefully as brief as possible because this conversation is a little longer than I would typically air, but I don't typically have my mom as the guest. So this quote-unquote interview went on for over 2 hours, and I did my best to cut it up and edit some things out that I felt were kind of just us going down tangents. So from time to time, it may feel like we are jumping around topic to topic, but that's why. I'm trying to spare you from our just spiraling of thoughts moments. I'll briefly share that we discuss my mom's entrepreneurial journey, how her upbringing shapes her mindset today, the power and importance of cultivating your inner voice, mothering and building businesses, and her top parenting moves. All right, here we go. Hello, LuAnn. Welcome to Sass Says.
Oh, sweetie. This is crazy. I have like a little bit of feeling when people say to me, "Oh, I'm so nervous to be on your show." And I'm like, why? It's just a conversation. I've done 800 interviews and I'm scared to death.
It's so funny. I wasn't nervous until I just said hello. And all of a sudden I just felt my grip on my pen get like super tight and my palms are sweating.
You would think we weren't a mother and daughter that have had major heart-to-hearts your entire life. Like, I feel like we've really been able to do that forever. Like now, like all of a sudden we're nervous about it.
I know. You know what I think is, for me, it's partly I got nervous because this will actually be a challenge because most people I'm asking questions truly having no idea what the answer is. And here I'm going to think I know some of the answers and I might not. And I'm going to have to carefully, ask follow-up questions because I could see myself going, oh, well, I know what she's going to say to that and not ask it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, so there's that aspect of it. And the other part that just made me nervous is that, if I ask something of someone else that they don't want to talk about, I'm like, yeah, okay, and they let me off the hook and this and that because we don't know each other. And this is like,
I know. Well, that's how I
Mm.
feel like. I feel like, well, I want to come here and honor you and your show and be as honest as possible. But then it's like, well, but do I want you to know all my dirty secrets?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right.
Hmm.
Well, I'm gonna start what I think is easy.
Okay.
Okay, just
Okay.
to ease in. All right. So you started essentially a side hustle
Hmm.
at a time when most people are trying to plan how they're going to get out of working.
Hmm.
So take me back to that time. Where were you mentally, emotionally that pushed the start of a well-designed business?
Well, I mean, it actually, in its most practical sense, it was because I was looking at the end of our business life, mine and dad's. At that point, running Window Works, we were the two primary salespeople, right? And the entire operation depended on him and I standing at someone's door, ringing the bell, and going in and successfully coming out with a window treatment or an awning sale. And it just got to be, seriously? Is he going to be 70 and knocking on doors? Am I going to be 60 and knocking on doors? And it just was like, well, I'm not going to go work for somebody else at Starbucks at this point. And I knew that I personally was not interested in anything remotely connected to retirement. And that was primarily because we are not, fabulously independently wealthy. So if I were a multi-billionaire, sure, I could be retired. Like that's easy.
Mhm.
But being retired on a budget when I'm have energy, have a brain, have capacity, have capability, no, I'm not interested in having that just isn't appeal to me. And it just got to be, well, what can we do? Oh, and for daddy, he hadn't come to terms yet with that he wasn't necessarily the type to retire. He did know that both of his parents, especially his father, worked well into his 80s, but he was at the point where different friends and colleagues, his actual contemporaries, were retired. And so I remember him struggling with it a little bit. Struggle's a big word. Dad doesn't struggle with a whole lot unless it has to do with you kids. But personally, just a little like, what am I going to do? Like, they're retired, they're hanging out. Why can't I hang out? And I would look at him and go, seriously, like, what do you think? You think you could manage to hang out for a day? I mean, I don't know, string 2 days together doing nothing. Let me see you do it.
Mhm.
And so it was a lot of conversation between us, a lot of really getting very real about what does retirement look like, him facing that he is a working person and likes the connection to work and the fulfillment that it comes from. But we both were very clear that it was not sustainable to be the ones that were driving the sales at Window Works, because that is that's a day-to-day, 5 day a week, every day of the year responsibility. And there's no middle ground to retire there. You can't be, let's go to see Uncle Fred and Aunt Michelle for a week in Florida and Window Works is still fine. So I was searching for the thing that I thought that I would be able to do so that if he wanted to be able to retire, I could do it on my own. It didn't require his working in it. And I could do it from anywhere. So if he wanted to go 2 weeks to Uncle Fred, I could go and still work. And my goal was to create something that would supplant our Window Works income. Because again, it wasn't like, well, let me see if I can make, 20K on the side. No, this wasn't going to be like Christmas and, kids, college fund money. This was, we needed to supplant the income. And so I just was on the hunt for this for quite a few years until I came upon this and I was like, ooh, I think I found it. So,
All right. And just, like I said, it's going to be hard. Knowing what I know,
mhm.
did you expect it to be what it is now and what your life is like now?
So there is the true core in my soul answer is 100% yes.
Hmm.
Now, you know, could it have not happened? Yes. Is everything that I've believed in my core, like, remember when I believed you would go to Georgetown.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, I also was like, and if it doesn't happen, we know the universe didn't have this in mind. So I have this thing where some things feel very real, very clear, very like I see them, but I don't go into a tailspin if they don't happen. And so, but this, I mean, I've said it on my show a couple of times. When I sat down and finally laid this out, it was October of 2015. And I had pages and pages of all the things I imagined that this would be. And I had a list of 26 specific ways that I thought I would monetize it. I literally envisioned the first 3 books that I would write based on it. I envisioned a LuAnn Live, you know, did they morph and did they tweak and did they develop and did I envision LuAnn University? That I did not envision. So, but the core of it, and once I had this idea, Christy, once I really got the clarity on specifically the name of the podcast, who the audience would be, and what the show would be like, it was just, it had to be successful. It was so necessary. And I'll tell you too, you run through it, you're going. It's like they all say about the duck looks calm at the top and the legs are going. So I'm doing it and I'm not human. In the back of my mind, it's like, oh my God, is it going to work? But there was this just quiet, like, stay on the track. It's going to work. And that very first, so October 2015, I formulate it with clarity. I present it to Daddy. He hears it, agrees, says, okay, let's go for it. And then the next, like, you know me with my signs, then this happened, and then that happened, and then that happened. And then I remember the day after Christmas that year, I sat down and I wrote the pitch email to Kravit to sponsor the podcast. And I worked on that email probably 4 or 5 hours. And then the next 2 or 3 days, I tweaked it for an hour, 2 hours each day, just literally crafting it, making it shorter, making it more direct, hitting a better point, really explaining what I saw as the vision of the podcast and what I saw was a plus for Kravit. And then the ultimate ask for the sponsorship. And I sent that email probably the 28th or 29th, the Monday after the holiday, the New Year's holiday, we got an email and it was like, hey, this is interesting, like to set up a phone call. And that Friday had the phone call. And I always called Jesse and Christine, my fairy godfather and fairy godmother of the podcast, and had the phone call with them on a 4 o'clock on a Friday, talked for about 45 minutes. And I remember Daddy and I went to Anthony's Coal Fire that night for dinner. And I'm sitting there at the bar with him and I go, I think they're going to say yes. And he's like, oh, that's great. And I'm like, you don't understand. I haven't recorded an episode and I really believe somebody is going to give me money to advertise on a show that I haven't made yet. And he's like, yeah, well, it's you. Of course you did it. And I'm just like, well, and Monday he emailed again and Tuesday we had another meeting and he said yes. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then I'm going to tell you, I know I'm talking a lot, but the next thing that happened was about a month. So it was lots of wonderful things, but about a month or so, maybe 2 weeks after we launched, I got an email from Mary Fran Brossard, who's a designer here in the New Jersey area, which I never knew. And she sent an email to WindowWorks, and it was basically to the effect of, I found your podcast. This information is incredible. This is going to change my interior design business. Thank you so much for doing this. And I had I did 3 episodes a week for the first year. So I probably had 10 or 12 episodes up. And I remember Kim and I looked at each other and we were like, oh my God, somebody's listening and they like it. And it was just that sort of thing, Christy, where there was just these little things, ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. And not to say that it was easy, not to say that it happened fast, but it just was like, yep, keep going, because it was a side hustle and it was hard to be doing that and keep my responsibility at WindowWorks. And do the production level that I had set for myself, the same production level that you have for you. It's like, this was not like, well, we're supposed to come out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but if I'm busy, we don't have to. No.
Yeah.
So
Is there another experience in your life that you would compare the experience of that sort of the signs, the clicks, the ticks of
Oh,
of
yeah.
everything sort of happening and falling in line?
Yeah. Oh, over and over and over. Always, always. I mean, do you not remember how it happened with Georgetown for you?
I mean, I might, but people listening won't.
Well, I don't know that I'll remember all 9 things, but I remember there were 9 things that had to happen.
Mm,
That I remember. And it started with, we were going to a open softball sort of showcase in, I want to say, it might have been all the way down to James Madison.
mm,
But maybe Virginia, maybe not all the way. It was James Madison in Virginia, but maybe not all the way as far as there, but somewhere around Virginia. And we were going to, and it was you, it's like an open college softball. We're hoping the coaches were like, the college coaches were going to be there and you were going to do your thing. And all the girls go through their paces. And we were leaving that night, like at 7 o'clock at night. And Allie Hubschman's Kathy comes into Window Works, which I don't know that she was ever in Window Works before. And she comes in and she's asking a question about window treatments and we're chit-chatting and she's like, how's everything going? I'm like, how's everything going? And I'm like, oh yeah, we're, and of course, for those listening, her sons and daughters had all gone to Georgetown. And so, and Christy and Allie, her other daughter, are in the same grade. And her older daughter, Courtney, was at Georgetown. And I said, oh, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go to Virginia. We're going to do this and we're going to do a softball showcase. And she says, LuAnn, Georgetown has a softball team this year. And I said, what? And she goes, brand new team. And I said, oh, really? And she goes, brand new coach, looking for good players. She goes, maybe you guys should stop at Georgetown. And I was like, huh. And we chatted a little bit more about it. And I go home to Daddy and we start talking about it. And he's like, well, I'm like, no, we got to go. We got to go. And, the long story short is that we went to her office. She actually let us in. We actually had a conversation. I was scared to death you weren't going to talk. You impressed the heck out of me at how poised you were.
Yeah.
I think it's the last time I ever doubted you, truly, as a person in the world presenting themselves, speaking, doing all the things, because you were young. You were only a senior in high school. And I remember, do you remember walking up the stairwell, me, you and Daddy up the stairwell to the second floor to the director's office?
So vaguely.
And I'm going, and I really was not a crazy mother in the moment. I really wasn't. I mean, maybe you'll tell me, you'll write the book about it. But I just couldn't not tell you this. And we're walking up the stairs and I'm saying, listen, we didn't have a lot of time to prepare for this, but I need you to understand, if she even lets me and Dad in the room, she's going to expect you to speak. So, I just saying that. Yeah. And I just needed you to know that I wasn't going to. Like, I didn't want you and Dad to be like, well, you always talk for us, so you'll talk. And I was like, no, I'm not going to. And Dad's like, just leave her alone, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm just letting her know that I am not opening my mouth. You are not opening your mouth, and she will have to speak. If it takes her a minute to gather her thoughts. And you were like, okay, I got it. And I was like, I hope you do. And man alive, I was so impressed by you. And that's the last time I ever wondered about you. And I was like, well, she's everything we raised her to be and everything her education taught her to be. I was like, but we just didn't see it that much because, of course, you were always with me. So I always did the talking.
Yeah, I started saying when I was in college and maybe a little bit after college that you probably remember me saying this, but when you're not around, I'm you. It's when you're around that I just, for lack of a better way to say it, like take a back seat.
Right.
It's like, I don't have to, because it's not really my comfort zone entirely to be, well, I don't know how I want to describe that, but it's almost like I have to, me, I have to be really into it, whatever it is, to be enthusiastic and to be out there and to be super vocal. And so it's rare, or it was rare at that time, that there would be that situation
where I'd be so enthusiastic that I'd have to sort of be like, Mom, stop, because I
Yes.
just didn't care enough.
Right.
It was
Right.
like, you've got enough energy for the two of us. You've got enough to say for the two of us. And if I really, really felt something strongly, then I would have said something. But it's just, it's funny. And I also was always, I've always been sort of in the closet about, what I don't know. Not in the closet, but I don't know. I just always was quiet about my
accomplishments.
my accomplishments or my strength, or it was just always like, you'll find out when you need to know.
That's right. Wait, well, and I mean, look, I think Lucy's going to be the same way. I hate to tell you, it's just, and it's this thing where I'm always like, I'm so grateful that I always felt like we had a close relationship, because you were not the type of person to be like, yeah, that's amazing. But it was like, I was like, she's really happy right now. That's great. Like, like we had a tea party for her birthday and she loves it. You know what I mean? And look, that's a big part of motherhood, is recognizing that your child is not you. They are not an extension of you. They are not going to process the way you are. And, I've made fun of it 1,000 times. How am I going to live vicariously through you if you won't do the darn things I want you to do that I never got to do? You're right. But
I tried.
Yeah. And that was the thing. Once I really recognized that, because I was interested in language, I wanted you to take language. Because I always wanted to play the piano. I wanted you to play the piano. Once I realized 2 or 3 times, it was like, okay, get your head on straight. Why don't you ask this little person what she would like to do? Because this signing her up for the things that you never got to do is not working, So it's a learning curve of motherhood.
Yeah.
Because you want for your kid the things that you didn't have. So you go right to the things that you wanted.
Yeah. You know what? I think that, at least so far in my short experience with motherhood in that way, is I did have so much that I want to recreate. And it's almost like, sometimes it's like, just do less. It's okay. Just, they have enough. We do enough.
Yes.
It's okay.
It's true. It's true. 100% true.
And you know what? At least in my experience, I might have hated some of those things, but I survived them. Like, it wasn't, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like anything that you signed me up for was like, bullfighting.
Right. No,
it's
it was
like
French lessons.
Yeah, like, it was okay. It was okay. All right. So I gotta could go anywhere right now.
Yeah. I it's funny, because when you asked if there's other things that I knew like that, I brought up something that was your thing, but I did know it in my core. But there have been other things like that in my life too, where I just know something. And I think it's, I've learned to think of it as a cultivation of your intuition, a learning. I've always talked to you about, listen to your goddess voice. I feel like when you're really, it's kind of like, you've played sports, Christy, at a very high level. You're a very successful athlete. And I mean, you were a fast pitch softball player and you were the pitcher. Those games when you were just throwing heat and you were throwing strikes and risers and changeups, and we were in the zone, right? And when I feel like I'm really in tune with my intuition and I'm really in tune with my higher goddess voice, it's like that when I was planning the podcast and, doing all of that. And so I describe it so that someone listening, if you start to recognize that feeling of things are clicking and I'm feeling good about this, start to pay attention to that and start to understand. Now listen for the voice. What is the voice telling you? This is good. Keep doing this. Or, okay, pull back here, do that. Like, it's in you, but you have to hear your goddess talk.
Yeah. You're talking about being in alignment with your authentic self and your core values. And that is something, we talk a lot about over here, is slowing down long enough and being quiet, metaphorically, long enough to hear it. because we
Yes.
just go, 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 go. And you end
Right.
up in routines and ruts and just doing things to do them and not giving ourselves the time to say, huh, is this what I want? What do I want? Or this is making me unhappy. Why?
Right. Right. It's the valuation. It's the self looking back, looking at yourself and saying, am I honoring myself now? Does this feel great for me? Is this, answering a need in me? Am I, or am I doing it because of somebody else or an outside external thing? Does it feel right? Right. It's tuning in. It's tuning in.
And you know what? Again, this is going to be one of those things that I think I know the answer, but perhaps I don't. I say that I've learned that. I think I learned that, sort of in what became the aspect of it that has become second nature was from you, and you talking about goddess voice and all of that. And I think as an adult, when when life just amped up and got heavier and got harder, I had to push that learning through therapy, through reading, through interviewing people. And so what was it for you? Like, how did you learn that? How did you, all the things that you talk about, just like trusting your intuition, trusting your gut, not just how did you learn it, but what was it like, the process of, I guess, it's one thing to know you have to, it's another thing to really trust it.
Mm. Well, that I had a very unusual upbringing in the sense that my mom, my mother, your grandmother, and Aunt Honey, my mom's sister, um, you know, started me and all of us, the six of us kids. I think I stick to speaking to myself about myself, instead of for my brother, my cousins. I was very impacted by my Aunt Honey in particular feeding me things to read. First of all, I was the girl that would sit in the corner and read. That was who I was now. And it's a very, and I know maybe, I don't know if you've realized that about me, but it is a huge dichotomy of me. I am the girl that's outside playing kickball and, jailbreak with the boys, but when the boys are inside and they're, I don't know, roughhousing, I'm over at the bookshelf taking the books off the shelves and sitting on the sofa in the living room by myself and reading. That's how my childhood was. And, Aunt Honey gave me, Napoleon Hill, books, Dale Carnegie books, James Allen's books, Og Mandino's books, Leo Buscaglia's books, Wayne Dyer's books. I mean, I'm 10, 11, 12, 13 years old and devouring
Yeah.
these books, like literally devouring them. And I think when you are fortunate enough to have a mother like I did, who just always, her literally was like, well, of course you can do it. Of course you can do it. Of course. It was just like, if you can't do it, who can do it? Like, go do it. And so she literally had that belief for me. And now I'm also at a very young age reading these books that are teaching you, believe in yourself and understand that you are a divine, creation of the universe. And the universe doesn't create mistakes. The universe doesn't do things willy-nilly. I always say to myself, how like the bees are put on the planet because the bees have a job and they do the thing with the plants, and then that makes the plants do a thing, and then the spiders eat the things, and like it's literally all worked out. And so why would you question that your human existence is not part of that being worked out? You're here for a reason. And so you combine the gift of a mother who literally says to you, you can do anything in any way, shape, or form. That sentence came out in 5,000 variations. And then you are influenced by such an early age about big thinkers who believe and tell you that if you can imagine it, you can create it. If you can visualize it, you can create it. If you can manifest it, then you must be able to do it. It's not like I came to it at 25 or 30 or 35 or 40, which, by the way, if you come to it at that point in your life, yay, and just at
Right.
least get there. But I come to it at 10.
Yeah.
It's burned on my brain cells.
I was just thinking that it reminds me of, and I've heard you say that before, but I just was thinking it's almost like when people say to teach your kids a second language as a kid.
Yep.
It just it becomes part of them in a way that it's different from adult brains
That's right.
learning things.
That's right. It's just
Yeah.
my brain, I really believe, was from external circumstances, tremendous gift of both my mother and my Aunt Honey, programmed to trust that I am deserving. I'm a human person. You are a human person. You are deserving of it. And all we have to do is believe enough in ourselves to give ourselves the gift of trying something, of doing it and seeing it to completion. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean I've succeeded in everything. Let's not confuse things. Like
Mhm.
one bit. This
Yeah.
is not a straight ticket to life is perfect, but it is a straight ticket to a perspective on life and problems.
Mhm. A big reason why we're sitting here is because our colleagues, our friends, they kind of want the dirt. They want the behind the scenes, like what is hard for LuAnn. And I think, you know, I think in your work and even in your family to some extent, you do have that reputation or just, I don't know, vibe, as the kids say these days, as
You're a nut.
not having, as not struggling, as not having challenges in your life. And I c- I can't I can't believe that's true. It and it doesn't mean like you said, it doesn't mean that you've failed and you've spiraled into a deep depression, but where 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 do you struggle? Where do you find challenge to everything that you've said? Like, have you ever had a point where you've questioned, yourself or what you're doing or anything that comes to mind?
There's a lot there. There's a lot that goes through my mind. Of course, I'm scanning throughout my life as well, right? And there have been pivotal moments um, where there would be quote unquote what would be seen as a failure, right? Um, but I think the secret sauce of my perspective is that and I know this sounds crazy, and I've been asked this on multiple podcasts and interviews, and I think what it is there have been objective failures. There's no question. There are times when I have failed, but they don't sit with me and they don't put me into a spiral because as long as I've learned something from it, now I'm like, well, that's why that happened. I needed that lesson.
Right.
Like I immediately moved to,
Yeah.
oh, heck, right?
Yeah.
Like I needed that lesson and I go into analyzation mode of it. And it's almost like looking right back. Now, it doesn't mean, and sometimes the aha or the awareness of what is the lesson from the failure isn't connected to it. It's not right there. Um, Sometimes it comes weeks or months or in hindsight years later, or sometimes I think I've got the lesson right at the moment. And then years later, I'll be like, whoa, but this was the real lesson.
Mhm.
But you know what? I have often thought, should I just say, well, of course, there's been times when I've really just been in a puddle of mud crying for days because I feel like people think I'm full of crap, or people won't understand that I actually am a human person that does have all the emotions. But I really just, and you know me, Christy, I say it like, put your big girl panties on, right? And that's the flippant outward expression of, I just processed this. I just understood what my mistake was, how I got myself into this situation. And as long as I can understand what I did, I'm not in danger of repeating it. So we're good. Let's just move on from here. And
right,
I don't beat myself up, because you know what I say on my show all the time. If you don't think you're going to make a mistake, then you may as well stay home in bed, because the rest of us are out here putting our stuff on the line. We're putting ourselves out there risking. So I know I'm going to make a mistake. It's just, will I learn from it? Will I grow from it? And how will I spin that into being a better, whatever it is, mother, business person, friend, whatever. But yes, I certainly have failed, but as long as I can analyze and learn from it, I'm like, okay, to me, that's the whole point of a failure. I think that's what it is. At its core, I believe our failures are to teach us a lesson. And I believe that the universe puts a lesson in front of us until we learn it. When you don't pay attention and you don't learn the lesson, the universe will keep giving you that same scenario. And that's when you're like, why does this always happen to me? How come I can't get past this? How come this is always happening? Well, it's because I believe you're not analyzing your part in that, and you're not growing, and you're not making the choice. And between all the reading that I did as a young child and continued all through my life, and just growing up and getting darn old and having perspective, it's like anything else. You get the analyzation faster, the perspective faster, and get up and move on and put those big girl panties on.
All right. So let's maybe take it on a more day to day.
Okay. Day to day, yes, it's harder.
What is something that you actively think about as something you want to do differently, something you want to improve upon, something that you're working on within yourself?
Oh, that's so much easier, right? Because day to day, I'm consistently struggling with productivity, with maximizing the time I have for the tasks that I need to do, struggle with not, I'm a very big idea person. You know that, right? I see the vision, there it is. You've been at the other end of it. Here's the thing, go get it done. You know what I mean? When you worked for me. And
I thought there were times I actually seriously thought, you were kidding.
Yeah. Because the idea was so big, so bold, and how could it possibly have a deadline of 2 weeks from now, right?
Yeah, the idea was so big, and then 2 days later you're like, so where are we with that? I'm like, oh, I thought this was on the big 5-year plan.
Yeah, no, this was in 2 weeks. Where is it, right? Yeah, no, I mean, and so that's a legitimate struggle for me. Legit. It's like, LuAnn, okay, it all can't be the big idea. Somebody's got to open the email. Somebody's got to do the work. And so that has been a big lesson the last several years of the podcast. And it is a consistent struggle with fighting the urge to just be in the top clouds vision of the thing and be, oh no, see, sweetie, somebody has to be down here in the weeds and opening the emails and answering the people and doing the things.
So talk to someone who's hearing that and going, oh, LuAnn, sounds like a really hard problem to have. You have so much vision, you have so many ideas. There are people on the complete opposite end of the spectrum or somewhere in between going, I have a hard time seeing the big picture. What is someone who doesn't share that experience with you? What might they not realize about what is challenging about that? What does the challenge feel like?
It feels like there's a ping pong pinball game in my head every day. That's what it is.
See? Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it is. They get bing, bang, bing, bang, 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 bang. And it's like, okay, sweetie, just sit down and just open the computer. Bing, 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 bing. Like, it's like insanity. Like, I've said it my entire life. If anybody ever listened to the conversation in my head for 3 days straight, they would put a straitjacket on me. Like,
Yeah,
there's no way.
It's exhausting.
It
Yeah.
is. It's insanity.
And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no. And what I was going to say is, for somebody that's not, their day-to-day life, and that's not the thing, typically that's a person, Vita is a good example. On my podcast, I have a recurring guest, Vita Vykovska, and we do a WTF series, Window Treatment Fridays. And Vita is highly process driven, highly organized. We call her the spreadsheet queen. And for somebody, like, what it is for me, I know that I have to fight against this in order to be productive during the day. But my big aha over the last 5 years, and my cousin Eileen Hahn taught this to me, is now at this stage of my life, I don't beat myself up for it. I do not require myself to be organized and process driven and spreadsheet driven like Vita is, because it's like, if you are the pitcher on the Yankees, you have a completely different skill set than the catcher does. And the pitcher doesn't have to go out there every day and go, man, I really wish I could catch. And so
or I really should learn how to catch.
Exactly. And I spent 1,000 years of my adult life saying, I should be able to do this.
Yeah.
And now it's a funny place to be, because now I have given myself the grace to understand that it's not my superpower. It's not even remotely a skill set. However, that doesn't give me carte blanche to be a lunatic every day and to just, issue these big dreams and ask everybody behind me to make them happen.
Yeah.
So it's a thing. It's a thing.
I made a note as you were talking, and I think you just addressed it, but in not being the person to not only not do it, but not care to do it, the opening of the email and the responding to the people and the doing all of the things to make the big dreams and the big visions happen, and I could see it in my time working with you, that there was a time though where that led to guilt and stress and like, because at the end of the day, it is your name on the door, so to speak. And if the emails don't get answered, if the stuff doesn't happen, it's ultimately you and your responsibility.
Right. And here's what happens. This is when we talk about what do I struggle with on the day to day. When I was doing this the first year and a half by myself, then you came on and helped me, right? But even then you weren't going to answer my emails, right?
No,
you would take care of, generic things. But here's how this manifests in that ping pong, and that like what I struggle with is, left to my own devices, I still will push all of that to the curb, whether the curb is at the end of the day or the end of the week. And that's when what happens is it's the fighting, because I'm like, to your point, I'm still going to do it. It's my name on the door. I am not going to be disrespectful to anybody, without, at least trying not to. I'm going to always do my best. But what happens is that type of work is not happy work for me, all the busy work, all the detail work. And so this is how I started working 12, 13-hour days, because I would do all the work I like to do. And then it would be 6:30 and I'd be like, well, all right, now you actually have to do this. And now it might take me another 2 hours. And that's why, your father's yelling at me because I'm working until 9 o'clock at night. And that was the beginning years of the podcast, of just having that cycle. And like you said, you saw the cycle of, okay, this stinks. I'm not doing a good job here. But now I'm actively in, okay, LuAnn, it's 2 o'clock. Do you require waiting until 6 o'clock to do this so that you have to do it against a deadline? Or could you just be a grown up and do the work that you don't like to do at 2 o'clock? What would that
Mhm.
feel like? I mean, it's a daily thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can imagine it being very challenging though, because it's going, I mean, on one hand, it's like we all have stuff we just have to get done, right? But yeah, I don't know. It's going against your natural flow.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It is. It's going against the natural flow. And when you are working for yourself and you don't have children and there really aren't that many constraints on your time, for me, at this season of my life, if we were talking a year ago, I don't even know if I would recognize it, honestly. I would just be in the knee deep struggle of it. Now I'm really making some good strides on it in the last couple of months with working with Amber de la Garza, in fact. And, it's, it's because in the season of life, I don't have children, I don't have responsibilities, I don't have to make dinner. It's why I've allowed the day to extend so long.
Mhm.
So now it's the cognitive recognition of, if I would just do the things that are not my favorite things to do earlier in the day, I probably could work a regular day. Like, what would that be like? Like, maybe I would babysit for you more often. Wouldn't that be fun? Like, maybe I'd pick the kids up at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, like, because I got
Yeah.
all my work done instead of waiting until 6 o'clock to do all the things
Yeah.
and only
Well,
doing the
and
fun things.
so there was a time though where you did have to make dinner and you did have a young kid and you had stepchildren who were coming over that needed food and sometimes even living with you. And, you know, what did it look like then? How did you make that work?
One of the things is that I, uh, there's two things. There's two sides of it. One is the actual, just the schedule of it. Look, I listen to your show. I know that, you know, my mother's generation was the one that, put the bacon in the pan and, fried it up and did all the things and, still let you know you were a woman, right? Like,
Mhm.
right. Like, that was my mom's generation. Like, oh, we can work and we can have a family. And that was a joke. Right. And then by my generation, it was like, oh, you really can work and have a family. But it was like, you really can work and do all the things at
Yeah.
home too, because your
Mhm.
dad didn't change a blasted diaper in his entire life.
Right.
And the 5 times his entire life he was responsible for your care when I was not in the house, he was very clearly babysitting. like I would literally say, will you babysit? Like, instead of
Mhm.
like, I'm leaving, you're in charge, right? So
Mhm.
I listen to your show all the time, and it's the development of the ages of the women, and of course other women have been more successful throughout the years. It's a generalization, a stereotype, right? But the thing is, there's two parts of the answer. The first part of the answer is just the very practical. As being the mother in the house who had to put the dinner on the table, there was no there was no like, we're going to eat out dinner 4 nights a week. There was no, hey, Vin, will you like, put those burgers on the grill so they're ready when I get home? It was like nobody ate unless I came home and cooked it. It was as simple as that. There was no thought, there was no thinking. It was like, get up and leave work in
Mm.
time to feed people. Like,
Yeah.
there
There
wasn't
was
a
no question.
choice.
It wasn't,
Right.
yeah,
There was
you
just
just did it.
no choice.
Yeah.
And, when your brothers were in the house and they were teenagers and they ate like sons of a guns, I spent Sundays like making 40 chicken cutlets, and 3 and 4 pounds of macaroni salad to have as snacks while they waited for dinner during the week. Right. But the second thing, and the other part of it is on a philosophy level, is as a mother, I always believed that that was my number one thing to do first. You've heard me say it as a joke before. Your job is to put good humans on the planet. It's like, you gave birth to this child, raise them right, do your very best by them. And so I remember when we were talking about having you. And of course, daddy had 3 kids from his first marriage, and his first wife did not work, randomly here and there, part-time Saturday things and stuff, but she was a stay-at-home mom. And he said to me, and we were running Window Works obviously by then. And I remember very clearly the conversation. He was like, well, I mean, if we have a kid, you're going to go back to work. And I'm thinking to myself, try and keep me from working.
Duh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I said, well, of course. And then I immediately started to negotiate for maternity leave. I was like, but I get to stay home like a little while, right? Right. And so we negotiated that. But then I, right there on the spot, negotiated for middle school years. And I said to him, I said, okay, here's the thing. I am going to go back to work. And we negotiated a 3-month maternity leave, which I took 4 weeks of, right? And so I said, okay, fine. I'll
By
go back.
choice.
Yes, right. By
Yeah.
choice. Oh, yeah. Total
Yeah.
lunatic.
Yeah.
And good baby. I had a very good baby. I had a very good pregnancy, a very easy delivery, and a very good baby. So that is very much part of that reality. And that was very fortunate. But I negotiated the 3 months off. And then I said, but here's the thing. When this baby, whatever year the grammar school stops having the aftercare program, then I pick this child up after school. And of course, I'm not even pregnant yet. And he's looking at me like, I'll say yes to anything, and he's like, okay, but you know me, I get very specific. I'm like, no, 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 no. Let's have a very clear conversation. I said, I'm talking about, it could be 4th grade, it could be 5th grade, it could be 6th grade. And you are going to look at me and you're going to say, this kid is 10 or 11 years old, maybe 12. And this kid can walk home 4 blocks from school, let themselves in, and you can come home from work at 5 o'clock. And I'm telling you right now that I'm going home, that I am not having a latchkey child. And he was like, okay, fine. And he didn't get and I never forget when you were in 5th grade and there was no more aftercare and the school started and I was like picked up at 3 o'clock, and he's like, where are you going? And I'm like, to go get Christy. He's like, oh yeah, first day of school, gonna go get her. And, I'm like, yeah, okay, bye. And then he came home from work at like 6 o'clock. He's, what happened to you? I'm like, what do you mean what happened to me? Because there's no cell phones then.
Right.
And he's like, I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you picked her up, you never came back. I'm like, right, because I'm home with her now. And it was so funny because it was so dad. He was like, oh, okay, because it was the first day. I'm like, because it's the first day of the rest of her life. Yeah. And he just was like, wait, this is an everyday thing. I'm like, uh-huh. And I just was like, and I fully believe that that was one of the best things I ever did as a mother and as a very foundational thing for our relationship and ability to talk to each other. Is all those hours after school from the time you were in 5th grade. And I did it until you drove yourself, until you had a license. And even, 16 and all of the things, 15, 16. And of course, if you had a softball practice or a basketball practice, I didn't leave work at 3 o'clock and just sit home. I picked you up after practice. But being there and leaving the time and space, because children, especially middle school age kids, need a place to talk. And you especially, but I think all kids aren't exactly going to be like, oh, mom, you just came in at 5 o'clock and it's 15 minutes until you cook dinner. Think I could hit you with like all the girls that treated me like crap today because I really got my feelings hurt. Like no kid is going to process that quickly. You need hours of time to know, and a car ride to know that, oh, mom's going to be here today. I don't have the guts to have the conversation today, but she'll be there again tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, stability.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what, I think, touching on this, I made a note. I know, you listened to Corrin's show, and we talked a lot about the generational differences. And, I think what strikes me is hearing your experience, knowing my own, just as far as like the working and family and what it looks like, and you can do it all, but you're still expected to do it all, and this whole thing, it's like I think it is the perfect example of when you think of why does it take so long for societal, systemic, cultural changes to happen? That's what I think of, because it's like I'll speak for myself. For me, like I said on that show, I heard, yeah, yeah, I heard everything should be equal. I heard women rights, all the things, but it wasn't what I witnessed.
It's not what you grew up with, right?
Right. But I grew up with something different than what you grew up with.
Right.
And now for me to make a big enough change in my life, mm, to make a change that will make a difference truly in my daughter's life, it, I don't know that I can do it.
No, it's there's maybe hope by Lucy. By the
Yeah,
time Lucy
right.
comes,
It's like,
she might literally have a 50-50
yeah, it's
situation
like,
like you and Corrin talked about.
it's like when you think about it big picture, that we make inches of
Yes.
difference, but
Yes.
those inches to the generations experiencing them feel like acres.
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting because I think those listening might have to listen to Corinne's episode on your podcast to get a little, we're having a little shorthand conversation
Yeah.
here, but basically, we're talking about like going from me where your dad actually quote unquote babysat you
Right.
to you in your generation where, JC does change diapers and, when you're sick, JC takes care of your kids.
Right.
When you were sick, you went to your grandparents.
Right.
Your dad never stayed home from work, not one day when you were
Yeah.
sick, not one time in his whole life. Like, oh, Christy's sick today. Should you stay home or me? It's like, if I couldn't stay home, it was like, okay, you're going to grandma's.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's a shift. But I have to also say that it's funny. I also, not that it wasn't hard to be everything, to be every single ride and every single, backpack thing, and everything was on me. There's no question. But there was a power in it too, because now it was my decisions on what we did with
Mm.
you.
Mhm.
It wasn't like, there was no room for, oh, I mean, shouldn't she be allowed to stay up till 9 o'clock tonight? No, sir, she should not.
Yeah.
Oh, she really wants to watch, Charlie Brown's Christmas. I don't care. She's got it on DVD. She'll see it tomorrow. I'm exhausted. She's exhausted. She's going to bed. Like,
Yeah.
there was no debate. It was like,
Yeah.
and I would be like, okay, if you really think she should, then you can do morning with her. Because I
Right.
know she's tired and she's going to be cranky. Are you
Yeah.
going to get up and do morning and brush your teeth and her hair and her shoes? And he'd be like, no, ma'am. I'd be like, all right, then shut up about Charlie Brown's Christmas. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't
Yeah.
know it's on and we don't have to tell her.
Yeah, I think though that definitely also speaks to your personality, because there are women who want that discussion, who want that
Okay, yes.
that
Accept that.
um that collaboration,
Yes.
right? Who
Oh, no. If you
who
want it. But my thing is you couldn't just dip in and have a collaboration once every 3 weeks. It's
right.
like, you're either in
Yeah.
or you're out.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what it was.
Yeah.
It was like, don't come in here and be like, oh, hey,
Yeah.
shouldn't we do this? Like,
Yeah.
one of the clearly first things was when I was, we do the sleep training, right? To cry yourself to sleep. And you were, I don't know if you were 5 months old or whatever you were. And you were mostly a really good baby, but you're a baby. And, here you were one night, put you to sleep and you went to sleep. And then of course you woke up 2 o'clock in the morning crying and you go in and you're like, no wet diaper, not hungry, none of the things. I'm like, oh, okay. So you're just crying. Love this because, I got to get up in 6 hours and work. And, so, 2, 3, 4 nights, all of a sudden, here we are every night, 2 o'clock in the morning after sleeping through the night. And I got to get up and walk and talk and coo you and do all the things. And I loved you and you were so adorable and you're so cute. I did not like it.
It's okay.
But right. But
Okay.
I still got to get up in the
Right.
morning
Yeah.
and get to work. It's not like I can sleep late because you kept me up. And after 4 or 5 nights of this, I was like, okay, there's clearly nothing wrong with her. But now we are developing this habit that she whines and she gets a reward with her mom holding her for 45 minutes in the middle of the night. So I said, that's it. She's going to, if she gets up tonight, she's going to cry it out. And he was, here you are. And he wakes up and I wake up and he's like, and it was hard. It was so hard to listen to you cry. And it goes on 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And he's like, you have got to be kidding me right now.
Yeah.
You are really not going to go in there. And I was like, no, sir, I'm not. And he's like, you're heartless. How can you be listening to this? And I'm like, because I just did 5 nights and I know
Yeah.
that going in there isn't going to make a difference. It's just going to perpetuate this. And he goes, well, this is ridiculous. I have to go in there then. And I said, great. Then you go tomorrow night too. He went, what? I said, you go in there tonight, then you go in every night. And he was like, and he
Yeah.
put the covers over and he just
Yeah.
put the pillow over his head. And
Yeah.
that was it. And so there was that dynamic because, you can't step in and have an opinion for just this 10 minutes. That's hard. You
Yeah.
either are going to ride this freaking wave with me or
Yeah.
you're not,
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So,
Our joke is like, every now and then if he works from home
mm,
and or if he's just got a meeting from home in the morning or, a little bit during quarantine, right? When he was
yeah,
home. And like daytime's a different animal. And
yeah.
there were times where I don't even know what the example was. It wasn't even anything too pressing, but I just hit him with one time, like, listen, this is the daytime crew. Okay.
That's right.
The daytime crew does what the daytime crew needs to do. Nighttime crew is different. We have 2 adults for nighttime crew,
That's right.
and it's just like exactly that.
Yes.
You're better off not getting involved. And that
That's
was a mindset shift for me to literally have to say to myself, especially on days when he is home during the day, and this is during the week, but it's like, I will say, pretend he's not here.
yes. Yes.
Pretend he's not here because
Right.
otherwise I start losing my mind.
Right.
Like,
Why
I
aren't
know
you
you
helping
hear
me?
them.
Yes.
I know, or you're just helping wrong, and generally I don't even care when he helps wrong. But there is something different about the daytime. It's like
Yes.
there is
We have a rhythm.
different flow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that was the
Yeah.
thing. I really had, 98% care of you. Like, listen to me. Your dad loved you and he did 1,000
I
things
know.
for you.
Yes.
But it
It
was
just was different.
it's
different.
the nitty gritty of the grind of the day and of the
Yeah.
night. That was my responsibility. And
Yeah.
it was like, if you don't like it, you're going to have to help. You don't want to help? Okay, fine. Then just get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember, well, you know me, Christy. I've always been a straight shooter when it comes to motherhood. It's not at all it's cracked up to be. It
Mhm.
isn't. It's hard. It's thankless. It's it's frustrating.
Yeah.
You constantly question if you're doing the right thing, and just hoping and putting all your love into somebody and hoping that you're making the right decision. It's so hard. It
Mhm.
really is. And then you add the tired to it, being tired and exhausted. And what was one of the girls on your show recently talked about that crying was a trigger for her.
Veronica.
Was it Veronica? She was
Yeah.
sweet
Yeah.
lady. Yeah. And she just said, and it's not like crying my diaper's wet. It's crying like, I don't want that grape and I want that grape and this
Yeah.
grape. And it's just like, I brought me right back to, oh yeah. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't eat anything but peanut butter for a month. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, sweetie.
All right. Well, I'm gonna keep trying.
All
You know
right.
what I think is funny? You know what? And it feels it feels, and I have the same like ick feeling that I have now when we were talking earlier. Like people, like your friends, your colleagues, whatever, like wanting to know your struggle. And now me like wanting to find something that you relate to. It's like, it's it's a little ick. Like it's a little ick in that it's not about like taking you down. You know that, right? Like it's not about taking you down. It's for me as your daughter, it's about seeing you as a human.
Oh my goodness, Christy. I've told you the 2 or 3 times that stick out in my mind when I was nowhere near showing up as the mother that I wanted to show up as.
Mm,
I've had those moments. Oh my goodness. I told you the story of screaming at you when
yeah.
were took your sneakers off 3 times in a row in 25 minutes while we were trying to go to work. And
Yeah.
I just lost it and I just screamed at you. And you were 3 years old and your little face just looked at me and I was like, and then of course I had your brother who was 19 and I turned around and he looked at me like, what kind of
Mhm.
demon are you? And to see myself in your little face and the shock on his face, I was just like, really?
Mm,
Really? Like this is what you're doing right now? Like
yeah.
you've yelled at that level at this little tiny perfect little person because she took her sneakers off. And I
It's
was heart
annoying.
flying. I
Honestly,
was
it's
so heartbroken
annoying.
in
Like
myself.
but it's annoying the sneakers. Like
Oh yeah.
everything like that is
Yeah.
so challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what? When you're frustrated and you're annoyed, like put them back on. Okay. But that level, I mean, I just I just I mean, you it was 30 years ago. It was like it
Yeah.
was yesterday. I
Yeah.
just considered it a huge like, okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I keep saying, I keep in my mind saying I'm wrapping it up. So I just, you know what? I think that this is a whole other thing now, but mm, it's really only in the last few years. And I think I have said this to you before, so this shouldn't be like super crazy to hear, but it's only in the last few years that I really have been able to see faults of yours. And
That's
like
crazy.
it's really only in the last few years that I've been able to see, not, I shouldn't say faults, I meant flaws, and like just like areas where you are human. It's like, and it makes me think about my own kids a lot. It's like that when you hear all the time like your kids don't need a perfect mom, they need you. And like, but to me, to your kid, that the idea behind that is that you're not a perfect mom by like any cookie cutter society Pinterest model. Like you're their perfect mom.
Right.
So like as a kid, I can't say I ever like had the thought my mom is perfect.
Mhm.
It just was like you were my mom and everything about you was how it was supposed to be. And I rarely ever saw you as being in the wrong or being ignorant in any way. It was like you knew everything. You always knew what to say. You always knew what was right. You just were on a pedestal that to me now it's actually, I don't often say this word, but it's such a blessing now for me to have like taken you off that pedestal a bit,
Yeah.
because it's like I was trying to live up to this like like this just like vision of you that is not reality, and it
Right.
almost was like setting me up for being disappointed in myself because I wasn't what I thought you were. And it's like now in seeing your humanity a little bit more, and really just going back in time and thinking about my childhood, and even now just as an adult having conversations with you and experiencing you in your life and everything, it's like no, that's a human.
Yes.
and that's an imperfect human, and
Mhm.
that imperfect human was raised by imperfect humans, and the cycle continues. And it's kind of like what I was saying before, we're all going to do our best, but at the end of the day our kids are still going to have stuff,
That's right.
it's like, yeah.
So I want to tell you that I think that it's a part of it's a natural phenomenon, right? Like when you were describing, when I was a kid, I thought of you. I didn't say the word you're a perfect mom, but I thought of you as always doing the right thing, knowing the right thing, and blah, blah, blah. As you were saying, I'm like, yeah, I've had the same feeling about my mom.
Yeah.
But then you grow into womanhood, adulthood, whether, you're a man or a woman, and you grow into adulthood. And then you recognize, oh, yeah, these were not robots that raised us. They
Mhm.
were humans that raised us. And
Right.
what's so funny is I am like I that was a glaring, knocking off of the pedestal, that moment. But I can think of, off the top of my head, there's two huge easy things where I let you down and disappointed you in your childhood. Um and like, do you remember it took me like until like almost November of your kindergarten year to get it that school started at a certain time? Like,
I remember being late a lot. I don't,
yes,
yeah.
because time is, relative. It's like, all right, well, 8:05 or 8:10 or 8:15, like we'll get there.
Yeah.
And the thing was that what made me change, because I was, I attempted to get there on time, but here you are changing your darn sneakers every 20 minutes. Let's just say that too. Okay. But no, I attempted to get there, but I'm not that disciplined when it comes to things like that, especially then. I mean, I'm 20, I'm 30 years old at that point. I'm not, now I'm much more aware of my flaws and I work against them. So blah, blah, blah. But then I was, a cowboy. Bum, 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 bum. And daddy would be like, you should be leaving. I'm like, whatever. If you really care about her being on time, it's a perfect example. Then go ahead and take her to school. Oh, well, I've got an appointment. Great. Then let's not talk about this. Right. And he hated it because he's an on time person. But
Mhm.
I was just like, look, if it matters that much, you can take her. I can, sit here and have tea. Don't, it's fine. So, but the thing was, there was a day when I became aware that you were mortally embarrassed by being late.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, and that was it. Now,
Yeah.
never late again?
Yeah.
No. But
Yeah.
were we on time 99.9% of the time from like November of kindergarten year till like it was like, it wasn't just about, hey, I could slide in and I'll talk to the teacher or whatever. It was like and so that was a big moment for me. I was like, I have put this kid through this for the last couple of months and she's just a little girl and she's embarrassed and she feels bad. So yeah, I was not perfect, sweetie. I was not perfect.
Yeah.
Um, However, I will tell you that I do feel like there were a lot of things that I did intentionally, that I did from thought, that I
Mhm.
made a decision that this is the way I was going to approach raising you. And easy or not, I stuck by them. And there's, half a dozen things that I could speak to about what they were. And having been through it, they paid off. And so I am a person who's willing to do the hard thing
Give us
and
one.
give you one. The going, the putting my foot down at the 3 o'clock thing. And I used to do this thing. I think I've told you about this. I don't know if you remember it, but I used to do this thing where anytime I could be the parent to drive home, I would.
Mm.
So I didn't care how tired I was. If the movie was getting picked up at 12 o'clock at night or whatever it was. And, daddy, of course, would always offer to go out at night like that to do that. And I could be dog tired and I'd be like, nope, I'm doing the drive home, because what I learned was in the drive home, you hear all the kids talking and you hear the little stories and you hear the things, and it helped inform the experience that you were having and the things that were shaping what you were going through as a middle
Mm.
school and a high school person with troubles. And that was a lot of times where I was like, it's 10 degrees, it's New Jersey, I'm in my pajamas, I don't want to do this. And I didn't need to do it. You didn't expect me to do it. You know, at 16 mothers volunteered to do it, and I was like, nope, I'm the drive home mother. And I did it almost every trip. Okay. And I would drive both ways if I could, because I wanted that experience of hearing what was going on. And it paid off. It was not like, well, I did all that and it wasn't worth it. I did learn a lot. I also remember, do you remember all through middle school how kids would invite people to the parties with a Xerox copy of an invitation?
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not an invitation. And you're like, Mom, everybody's going. I'm like, well, I'm going to call the mother and make sure there's really a party. You got to be kidding me. You are not going to call. I'm like, oh, no, see, sweetie, I am going to call. And you were like, no, no, no. And we went through 7th and 8th grade. You must have gotten a half a dozen of these, you know, run off on the copy machine invitations to a party. And I just couldn't imagine that any adult would have people invited to their house with a Xerox invitation. And so I immediately thought it was a bogus invitation that, you know, kids were just going to get together because parents weren't going to be home, even though you were only in 7th and 8th grade. And the first one I called, and they were like, oh yeah, we're definitely having a party, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't say, well, how ridiculous is that? They didn't do a real invitation, right? But it turned out to be that was the culture of the school at the time, to just do it like that. And the thing was, I can remember, Christy, about the 5th or 6th time, and you were like, Mom, you cannot call again. You are the only mom that calls, and you were like mortified. And I'm like, Christy, here's the thing. I call or you don't go. And you're like, oh my God. And I'm like, you're like, why do you have to be like this? You know, everybody, every time you call, there's really a party. And I was like, sweetie, I call or you don't go. And that one time, I'll never forget your face. Here I am. It was the 3 boys. There was 3 boys that lived in town. The kid that was in your class was the youngest, and he had 2 older brothers in high school.
I know who you're talking about.
Uh-huh. And I called and I'm like, hey, Mrs. So-and-so, this is LuAnn Nigara. She's like, oh, hi. I'm like, yeah, my daughter Christy's in so-and-so's class. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, I said, so there's a party at the house on Saturday night. I just wanted to see if I could bring chips or soda or anything like that. And she's like, what? Yeah. Yeah, bogus. High school boys. You would have been a 7th grade little girl in a party filled with high school kids. And you just looked at me. She's like, you couldn't believe it. And I was like, and that was the thing. It was like, I remember being the only mother that insisted on this.
Yeah.
And I was just like, nope, we're doing it. And 1 out of 5 times, you know, it proved the thing, you know, that there was, but it's our job to say, remember, I wouldn't let you go to the movie theater when you were in 8th grade.
That I do remember. That was torturous, honestly.
Yeah. And do you remember that none of them actually went to the movie theater? Just like I said, they were all going to run back and forth the highway from Chili's to the bowling alley.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I knew they were full of crap.
Yeah.
And, you know, you were in 8th grade and you didn't know they were full of crap.
4-lane, like major
4-lane major highway.
Yeah.
6 8th grade girls running back and forth. Like, stop.
I think,
like,
I swear to God, I think I did it once. And the whole time I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. But
now
not
that's
from a
news
car.
to me. I
But
didn't
not
know
from
you
a
ever
car.
did it. Yeah, I didn't know you ever did it, because that night you didn't go and you found out that nobody was actually going to the movies. And do you remember, now let's go fast forward, you're in college.
Oh God.
Do you remember you went to the movies? You came home on winter break. You went to the movies with Lauren. And by the way, you went to the movies with Lauren. And here goes right back to my other thing. I was exhausted, tired, and wanted to go to sleep. And I sat up in the living room until you came home from the movies. And Dad's like, what are you doing?
In college?
Yep. And Dad's like, what are you doing? And I said, well, I mean, she hasn't been home. Who knows if she's going to want to talk? If I didn't pick you up, I stayed awake until you got home in case something happened and you wanted to talk. Right. And what I would always do is when you were younger, high school years, getting dropped off by different people, if I wasn't the one, I would go into the bedroom next to yours and I would go into the linen closet and I would dump out a bunch of towels. And I would pretend that 11 o'clock at night when you got home, I was folding towels. And because what would happen is if I ever walked into your room and said, how was your night? You'd be like, fine.
Right.
But you would come into the room and I'd be folding towels and you would be like, I'd be like, how was your night? And you'd be good. And if it wasn't a good night, after 2 or 3, 4 or 5 minutes, because you could see how there was 30 towels there, you'd be like, so-and-so said this to me. And the next thing you know, we would talk till 1 o'clock in the morning talking about your problems. But anyway, so this night you go to college, you're in college, you go to this movie with Lauren. And you come in and I'm sitting there and watching, Jimmy Fallon or whatever the heck I'm watching. And I lower the TV and you walk in and you're like, oh, what are you doing up? And I'm like, oh, I got, I love Jimmy Fallon, make up some nonsense, whatever it was on. And you're like, okay, so I'm going to go to bed. I'm like, okay, did you have a good time? And you're like, yeah. And you just looked at me and I'm like, what? And you're just like, I don't know. And I'm like, what? And you literally start tears in your eyes and you start welling up. And I'm like, whoa. And I go, what's going on? And you sit down and you look at me and you're like, I'm never going to be a good mother. I'm not going to be a good mother. And I'm
I
like,
remember this now.
whoa. And I'm
I
like,
didn't know where you're going
yeah.
with this. I
And
remember
and you're
now.
like, I don't think I can do it. And I'm like, well, why are we worried about this now? Number one,
Right.
like, please, is this your way of telling me something, right? And I was like, what do you mean, sweetie? What do you mean? And you're like, well, I went to the movies tonight and, I remembered all those years ago when I was 8th grade and you were the only mother that wouldn't let me to go to the movies with the other girls. All of my friends went and I was always so mad at you that you wouldn't let me go when I was in 8th grade and 9th grade and 10th grade. And you would say to me, you have no business being there. You have no idea. You think you're cool. You think you're prepared for this, but those boys are not going to say, you're only in 8th grade. You don't know what you're talking about. You are not prepared for this. And it's my job to protect you from that. And you were like, Mom, I saw those girls running around that theater. They were in 8th and 9th and 10th grade. And you were like, they have no business being there. And I was like, well, right. Okay. So what? You're like, how am I going to know that? I'm not going to know to say no, And I was like, and I remember saying to you, you'll know. You will know. And if you're not sure, you'll call me and I'll tell you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, but you'll know. You're going to raise your child. And it's an instinct. It was protection. It was knowing what's better instead of what I felt. What a lot of the parents did were like, whatever, let's let them go. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No.
I remember too, like, and I feel like I was, as an only child too, like in the growing up ages,
Yes, because
right?
you were
Like,
7 years younger
yes,
than the youngest.
it was like a lot of my friends were the youngest kid and the
Yes.
younger sibling and the,
Like,
you know,
whatever.
like, and I
See
could
ya.
totally get that now. Like, you know what, go.
Yeah.
It's, you know what I mean? And I get it. And there's, all sorts of things to think about there. But I just, I had this sort of like very insulated experience of being your only focus.
Yeah, well, I just like that. It's true. You say it like that, but to me, it's what I said. It was we had a business, I had responsibilities, but my number one was you. And
Yeah.
I very easily would look at customers, daddy, everybody else and say, nope, can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not doing it, not compromising, not bending, you know?
Yeah. All right. So that was for my peeps. For yours, what would they be surprised to know about you? What would anyone who's known you as the LuAnn Nigara be like, whoa, I had no idea. And it doesn't have to be anything like major, but like, I don't know.
What
What's
do you
something
think they'd be surprised to know?
Oh.
I feel like I'm a pretty open book.
I was gonna say that's tough because you've been kind of put yourself out there for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty like, this is what you get. I
You
will
know
tell
what?
you, go ahead.
You know what I sometimes still think of as as interesting
Okay, this should be good. Warning,
is
warning, Will
that
Robinson.
yeah, well, it's just because, and we don't have to elaborate on it because I don't think it's necessarily fair to, but that for all of your confidence and your empowerment and sort of this like woman in business leadership, there is still a very traditional
Hmm.
side of you.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that
100%.
it is very much like boom, boom, boom at work. And then there is still this like very,
I say swoosh 1950.
yes, but even that, it's a joke.
Yeah, but it's
And
true.
that is surface level, like kind of, you know, passive still in a way.
Mhm.
But there is truly at your core in your marriage, in your parenting, in you know, in your family, even just like there is sort of this very traditional nurturing side of you that comes out at certain times.
I agree. I think that's true. That is something that probably, especially because I always talk about how I don't cook and all the things. But
Yeah.
but just because I don't cook doesn't mean, like, if dad needs something, I'm gonna get up. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, if we both want a cup of tea, I'm gonna get up and get it. It's never gonna be
Right.
like, well, should I make the tea tonight, Lou? It's like, no, like, I'm make
Yeah.
the tea.
But I think too that there's also like, and maybe this was just my perspective, you know, as a kid and you know whatever, but there's also a part of you that likes to and wants
Yeah,
to. Like, you know, it's not, I would not every time, right?
right.
But when you bring him, I can picture, you know, when we lived with you and you guys on the couch, and I'm thinking of, you know, that week between Christmas and New Year's where
Mhm.
like who knows what day is what, and like I can picture, you know, dad saying like, "Oh, is there any pie left?" You know, and it was like, "I'll get you pie, Vin." You know, like there are times I think a lot more than someone might expect,
Hmm.
that it actually brings you joy to fill that role.
Yes, I agree. It is true. You're right, and it does extend to the family too. Like, if you guys are at our shore house or whatever, it's like, let me go do that for you. I want to do
Right.
that for you. I'll get the kid. I'll do this. I'll go to the grocery store. You know what I mean? Whatever, right? And I
Yeah.
talk a big talk about, like, I don't do stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's also part of, you know, what you and everyone else has been ingrained to think is the stuff.
And I also think what it is I know it's my choice to do it.
Mm,
To your point, I there's a part of me that likes to do that for
yeah.
you, whether it's you or Daddy or Beth or Bella or JC or whoever it is. There's a part of me, my mom and pop up if they're around. There's a part of me that does like to do that for people, but I don't feel put upon like I'm expected to do it because
Right.
I'm the
Which is
mother
different.
in the house.
Right.
Right.
It's different.
And I
Yeah.
think that is what's different about it.
Yeah. But even like even now I know you notice, like in my guest bathroom, there are toothbrushes and razors and makeup wipes.
Hmm.
That is because every year at Christmas, when our whole immediate family would be in the house, you would walk up with like these, like they weren't, yeah, they were like dollar store level, like, but they were there. It was
Right.
like, here's a razor if you didn't bring one, here's a toothbrush, here's toothpaste, like, and it's things like that that you know, it was such a simple, silly thing, but I have that stuff in my bathroom because
Right.
it's like someone might forget and
That's
someone might
right.
need it. And like, you know, I don't know. It's just there's certain little things like that
Yeah. Yeah.
that you do
That's
anyway.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're so domestic,
Oh, I'm
LuAnn.
just such a domestic
Just a
goddess.
little Susie homemaker.
That's me. That's me.
Is there anything on your brain, on your heart that is like, I really just want to say this one more thing in the context of anything we've talked about, or just anything maybe that you came into this thinking we would talk about that we didn't, that is just nagging at you or you want to share?
Um, I guess the only thing that crosses my mind is that I really when I on my show, I don't want people, I go out of my way to bring every lesson, every strategy I can and try and break it down and make it understood and heard in such a way that no one feels silly for having to need to learn it,
Mm.
right? That it's okay not to know things. Once you learn it, now you have the responsibility to act on it. But from a business standpoint, hey, I just want you to have the information. And with your show and with talking about the other side of our person, not the business side of our person, but the person, I really want people to know that it's okay to not feel perfect either as a person. I want you use those words. As I have done more and more live events, um, more and more people have come up to me and shared the struggles that they've gone through. And so many people didn't have, like, I had an amazing mother. I hope one day you'll say the same.
I
But
say it
I know
now.
I'm teasing you. I'm
Oh,
teasing you.
Madre
I'm teasing
mia,
you.
LuAnn.
No, 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 no. I am teasing you. I'm teasing you. Um, but I've had women come up to me and say, I didn't have a mother like yours. No one believed in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to do that now for myself, they've said to me, and I'm trying to rebuild. And I just there's so many good conversations on your show that I hope people just understand that whoever you are, it's okay. If you want to be a better version of it, you can. If the version you're at is the best you can be, then that's okay. And if you want help or need help, get the help. But the stories that you say in your head are just the stories.
Yeah.
They're not real.
Yeah.
Like, they're not real.
Mm-hmm.
Like the story that I tell in my head isn't real either. I have a
Right.
story in my head that says I can accomplish anything. Well, is that true? Is it true? Could I be the pitcher in the Yankees? No. Like, I can't accomplish anything. My
Right.
story is as untrue as somebody whose story that says, I'm not worth it, or I can't do this, or I'm not a good mom.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
it just becomes, who is the voice in your head? And if the people that raised you didn't help you to have good stories in your head, then to your point, Christy, find the therapist, find the people, surround yourself with people that lift you up, that help you see the best parts of yourself and help you bring those best parts out, because we all have them in us. It's just, did we tamp them down, or did we put, water on them and they bloomed?
Mm-hmm.
Mine were always watered, and I'm very, very lucky. They were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's a very crazy thing as I've gotten closer and closer to the men and women in my audience, and they have shared more and more their stories with me. And I just want for people to know that they're worth it.
Mm-hmm.
That you exist on this universe where I started. If you're on this universe, you're worth it. You're worth
Mm-hmm.
being here. You're worth being your best self, whatever that is at any moment. I don't know.
Boom.
Boom. I don't know. I don't know. Just, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a thing. You talk about deep stuff on your show, and I really, really am impressed by what you're doing, and I'm so grateful that you're doing it.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and yeah, all right. Well, in part 3, eventually, I'll actually ask you all of the questions that I prepared to ask you. So we'll do that. But in the meantime, thank you. And I'll, as always, link all of the things for people to find you in the show notes, and you know the drill. So
That's it. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, really, truly. It's been a real interesting and fun and cool thing to do this with you. Appreciate you.
Woo! All right. So what'd you think? Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got a little better understanding of who I am, who we Nigara women are, and why we're out here doing all the things that we do so publicly. And, it's funny because in the conversation, I really wondered, is this good, or do we just think it's good because we're us and we're having fun? And I also think, I've heard her say a lot of the things that she said on the show so many times that I'm not surprised by them in the way that I often am surprised when I interview a stranger. So it was actually warm and fuzzy listening to this conversation again in the editing process and going, whoa, okay, no, this is good. And perhaps this is too niche of a feeling, but when I interview a stranger, I never know how it's going to go. And thankfully, I interview amazing strangers who most of them become friends. And it's like as something powerful comes out of her mouth, I'm thinking, yes, keep going. Oh, good. This is great. And I'm relieved to know that we are and will continue to bring you great content. And my point in all of this is that I was convinced that LuAnn being my mom is interesting enough to carry an interview. I also know that my mom is an amazing podcast host and business owner and just an all-around stellar person. Those things were enough to carry a great interview. But I don't know, there was just something really cool about listening to it the way I would listen to any other podcast and have those thoughts of, oh, wow, this is amazing. Oh, that's a quote. Write that down. That's another quote. So good. And I don't know. It was cool. And I hope I'm conveying this in the way that I mean. And really, when I think about it, it's like there's a set of listening ears that you have on when your mom is speaking to you, guiding you, counseling you. There's another set of listening ears that I've put on when I'm listening to my mom counsel, coach, and empower other people. And this was like a new set of ears, hearing her share her wisdom and beliefs, obviously with me in the interview, but really knowing that she's sharing it with you. Like, that was different. I don't know. All right. Honestly, I have no idea if any of this is going to land or make sense to anyone else but me, but I'm not really sure that I care at this point. And the bottom line is that this was very cool. I have the best mom. I know you will take something valuable out of this. I did. And like I said, I've heard her say this stuff 1,000 times. So thank you, LuAnn, for all of your insight. It's so wonderful. You are hashtag, nope, I messed it up. You are a hashtag smart lady. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for listening. See ya.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of LuAnn Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.